you for all those meaningful contributions. Our next session, the United States of Women, welcomes two formidable women, Karen So and Valerie Jarrett. They will explore the current state and landscape of women's rights and how in recent years women have worked together to uphold citizens' voting rights and catalyze change. They may also touch on some recent events in the United States, if anything newsworthy has actually happened there. But our main question today is what lesson can be drawn from around the world for women and their allies fighting together for a more just and equal future. With that, I'll hand over the virtual mic to our moderator, CNBC's European anchor, Karen So. Karen, over to you.
Sophie, thank you very much for the introduction, and Valerie, welcome to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with momentum that we continue to see women demonstrate this year despite the pandemic. We've seen in Argentina to Poland, both of those countries, a big debate raging around abortion rights. And more broadly, a topic around healthcare, universal healthcare, wage justice. The term feminist internationalism has been used. How do you think women have used their voice this year, and also particularly in the United States, to demonstrate the need for change?
Well, hello, Karen. I am just delighted to be with you. I've been so looking forward to this forum. I think that women are finding their voices all across the world. And in the United States, for example, we have more women running for office than ever before. In the midterm elections, more women won seats in Congress. And now, for the first time, we're going to have a woman who's also Black and Indian American as the vice president, the second highest office of the land. We are not seeing the improvements that I'd like to see for women in senior positions in the corporate world, although I do think in the boards that I'm on that the conversation about diversity being a strength is a topic that is front and center as a business imperative, not just simply the right thing to do. So I think that the momentum is growing, and it should be. In the United States, we're half the population. We're graduating from college at higher rates than men. And we need to be breaking those glass ceilings, and we need support from men who are in positions of power to recognize the incredible value that we bring to the table.
Valerie, let's talk about the starting point, though, now, because it's been an extraordinary year. We've had a health crisis that has morphed into an economic one, which has brought job loss, particularly for women. Reports also suggesting that female entrepreneurs have been discouraged from starting new businesses. And of course, there's been the increase in work at home, the amount of unpaid chores that women have inherited. I think I saw a number, it was about 14 hours extra a week that women do in unpaid work in the home. How can we learn from this experience and ensure there is some rebalancing from here?
Well, that's a very good question. And for most of my adult life, I've been pushing for gender equity. And it's really from the perspective, Karen, that I had as a young, single, working mom. But I had a good job and health insurance and consistent quality daycare and parents who lived nearby, a terrific safety net. And I felt like I was holding on by my fingertips. And so I used to always wonder, well, what it must be like for those working families who have none of that safety net. And I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare inequities that have been in our societies for far too long. One example is paid leave. The United States is the only developed country that doesn't have a national paid leave policy. Paid sick days. In the midst of this virus, we don't want people going to work if they are sick, but if they have to choose between providing for their families and going to work, they would. The point you made about women disproportionately bearing the responsibilities for keeping their houses in order, keeping their children homeschooled, managing all that while still trying to work is a challenge. And of course, it is an impossible time to start a new business. Access to capital with an uncertain marketplace is untenable. And so I think going forward, as we try to rebuild, we should be aware of all of these vulnerabilities that have existed, and let's try to address them as we rebuild our economies globally.
As we talk about rebuilding, one of the challenges is around rehiring. It feels as though the goalpost has shifted. If you think about what it was like going into this crisis, we were talking about unemployment levels where it was very short queues. You could almost negotiate terms that were suitable to you. And of course, we had a very strong diversity conversation taking place. This has changed on a dime. We're now looking at record long unemployment queues. And it's very hard to see that the same terms, better positions will be negotiated from women going back into the workforce. What do corporates need to think about to ensure women have access to the same positions and pay as men when they are rehired on the back of this crisis?
Well, 2 points. Number one, it shouldn't be up to women to have to negotiate those terms. Tone starts at the top. And so I think those who are leading our corporations, be they small or large, need to recognize that they will be at a competitive advantage if they have women in the workforce. And so they should be thinking through what are the structural and cultural impediments that are preventing women from thriving. Equal pay is obvious. Look at the data. See whether or not you're paying women equally as you're paying men. And if you're not, close the gap and look at what are the structural reasons for why the gap was created in the first place. We've already talked about paid leave, paid sick days, workplace flexibility. That is essential in this environment. It was essential before, it's even more essential now. Women are going to put in the work, but they need to be able to address their responsibilities outside of work as well. Affordable childcare, another issue that the pandemic has laid bare. Quality affordable childcare. A culture that is supportive of women advancing. And that's something where we have to focus on how we're recruiting men and women to create that culture, a culture free from sexual harassment. I mean, those cultural tones have to start at the top, but they also have to be reinforced throughout the organization. So there are programs like the equal pay or paid leave, paid sick days, but then culture is important too. And you have to, I think that the business leaders have to go into the conversation under the premise that it is a strength, a competitive advantage in a global marketplace to make sure that your leadership, your workforce represents the market that you're going after.
As you talk about flexibility, we're hearing more and more that the work from home trend will continue after this pandemic, that there could be some form of a hybrid model where people do engage more in workplace activities from their own home. For some women, that is useful because they need the flexibility. For others, it's an incredible challenge because of the childcare duties, having children around the home where you're also trying to conduct business. How do employers get it right from here so it's not one size fits all for women?
Well, that's what I was going to say. It can't be one size fits all. And I think what employers have to do is, first of all, listen to their workforce. Ask them, how did this experience of working from home work for you? What were the challenges that you encountered? And what can we do to change the paradigm for what work looks like in order that when we come back strong, we actually come back better? And so I think it begins with a conversation. This isn't something that can be designed in isolation by people who are not affected by the decision. You've got to talk to the people whose lives are going to be impacted and see what the challenges and opportunities of this are. I have to say to you, one of the silver linings in the midst of a nightmare of a year is I've had an increasing number of men say to me, I actually like spending time with my family and having dinner at home and having more opportunity to not spend my hours commuting back and forth. And so perhaps at this, we'll also have some fundamental changes that improve the quality of life for men as well.
It has been an eye-opener for partners, hasn't it? Valerie, I want to ask you about the political backdrop in the United States. You're not just a businesswoman, but incredible background in politics as well. You're one of the longest serving and most senior advisors to President Barack Obama. Also had a very personal relationship with the Obamas, having hired a young Michelle Robinson when she was engaged to Obama. Now, one of the revelations from Obama's new memoirs, A Promised Land, is that as the president and the first lady departed the White House, they were drained physically and emotionally from the previous years in office, but also by the 2016 election results, stunned that Trump, who was diametrically opposed to everything they had stood for, was elected. And Obama hinted that this was a backlash against a black man inhabiting the White House, a nod to some of the racism that still exists across America. What did you make of those comments?
Well, I was on that plane ride with them as we left Washington, and I will say it was one of the more excruciating experiences of my life to know that after 8 years of working to try to make America better, stronger, safer, healthier, that the person who succeeded President Obama intended to try to dismantle all of that progress. And I also think, having been the first black couple in the White House, the standard that they held themselves to was a very high standard. And so in Michelle Obama's memoir, she talks about crying on that plane ride, really just for a half an hour straight, with the relief of that responsibility having come to an end, and feeling that they comported themselves in a way that was honorable and role model for children all across America, if not the world, for what this first couple that was of color did. And so I think President Obama's reflection was right, that there were many in this country that truly rebelled against his presidency simply because he was Black. The birther movement that was fueled by President Trump questioned his legitimacy to even be president in the first place. First time ever a president's residency or birth right to the presidency was questioned. And that's part of the challenge with being the first. However, I would say something else that troubled both of the Obamas in the last election was the fact in the 2016 election was that 100 million Americans did not vote. And so that's why Michelle Obama launched an initiative called When We All Vote. I chair the board, and it's designed to change the culture in our country around voting in a nonpartisan way. And in this past election, we saw a huge uptick in the number of people who voted, remarkably young people, which is really what gives me a signal of hope. And so President-elect Biden won by more votes than any other president in history. And President Trump, although he lost, he garnered more votes. And so that's an indication of activism and civic engagement, which I think bears well for the future of the United States.
President Trump, though, is now refusing to concede, and over his tenure we saw constant attacks on institutions across America. Obama also warned in his book that democracy is teetering on the brink of crisis. Do you share that concern?
I certainly do, and I had the privilege of being a co-chair for the Obama-Biden transition back in 2008. And I have to say that part of the reason we were able to hit the ground running in the midst of a crisis as well, you'll remember the banks were on the verge of collapse, the automobile industry was literally in bankruptcy, we had 2 wars going on, a lot on our plate, and we were able to hit the ground running in large part because of the cooperation and support we received from President Bush. Now, we didn't agree with him on just about any possible policy, but the help and openness with his administration, beginning the day after the election, allowing us into the agencies, getting briefings on everything from national security to the environment to healthcare, you name it, they opened their doors for us. And President Bush, Laura Bush, the entire family could not have been more supportive. And in return, President Obama demanded that we do the same when President Trump was elected. And that is not happening now. And every day that goes by, that there is this lack of cooperation, this unwillingness to face the reality of the outcome of the election, puts our country at peril. And as President-elect Biden said just yesterday, Americans may die because of this decision. You know, there's a difference between having a vaccine and vaccinating people. And the decisions that are being made by the Trump administration today will be implemented by the Biden administration. They should be privy to those conversations.
What type of president do you think Joe Biden will make, and how different will he need to be from President Obama to heal the deep divides across the United States?
Well, you know, I've known President-elect Biden since he was appointed by President Obama, selected as vice president. I worked with him every day for 8 years. I've seen him not just during good times, but in extraordinarily challenging times, both professionally and personally. He is a man of intellect, character, integrity, empathy. He wakes up every day committed to public service. This isn't about him, it's about all of us. And that is something he shared with President Obama, which is one of the many reasons President Obama selected him not once but twice to be his vice president. He has made it clear in the course of the campaign and the course of his life that he believes in reaching out. There were times, as President Obama describes in his memoir, that he would ask Joe to go up on the Hill and talk to the Republican members in the Senate because he knew he had a better relationship with them. They had history together. They went way back, and they were resentful of President Obama in a lot of ways. And so I think he goes into this with the country reeling from the last 4 years. He won in part because of the tone that he said, I'll run as a Democrat, I'll govern as the president for all of America. He has relationships with world leaders. He will reunite with our allies as opposed to only aligning with our enemies. And I think that should send a very positive signal, not just here in the United States, but around the world.
Valerie, we're all closely watching President-elect Biden's selection now for key positions, some hints that perhaps there'll be significant female appointees as well. What type of team do you expect Biden to build?
I think that he will build a team that reflects the diversity of our country. He said that all along. He honored that commitment by selecting, as we described earlier, the first Black Indian American woman as his running mate. His transition team is comprised majority of women, and I am confident that when all of the folks are put in place, his cabinet and his White House will reflect the diversity of our country. And the reason why is because he thinks he'll make better decisions if the country is represented around the table of the decision makers. The insight that comes from those variety of perspectives will help him be a better president.
I want to ask you a little bit about Kamala Harris, who makes history, set to become the first female vice president. You know, vice president role was really propelled into focus as we saw President Trump catch COVID-19 during the campaign. The realization hit that we have two fairly elderly gentlemen in a high-risk category of more serious COVID symptoms. So the pivot then became, what type of vice president would Pence and Harris make at this point? Now, as we debate Biden-Harris and their victory, there's no automatic assumption that workplaces improve on diversity and inclusion just because there'll be a female vice president. But what type of leadership and what type of inclusive approach can Harris make to ensure that it is a good leadership for women and send some inspiring messages?
Well, tone does start at the top. And you're right, just because she's a woman doesn't necessarily translate into practices. But if you knew her, as I do, you know her commitment to diversity. She's always been supportive of women. She repeats quite often her mother's adage that just because you're the first means you shouldn't be the last, and that you have to leave the door open. And from the women I know who've been a part of her team in the Senate and her campaign, they speak volumes of how empowering she is. And so I think she and President-elect Biden will make sure that women and people of color, people with disabilities, the LGBT community, people of all faiths are welcome in this administration, and that their perspectives help the decision-making process. So it is a mindset about the importance of diversity and a willingness to say, what are the barriers that we should remove so that women can thrive? What can we do leading by example? And I am confident that that dynamic duo will do just that.
Valerie, one of the first challenges is to find bipartisan support to bring a stimulus bill to the table. There's been much debate before the election. Do you think it's possible? Do you think the Republicans and Democrats can bridge the gap on this issue?
I think it's essential. It's outrageous that the House passed a bill back in May and that there are millions of Americans out of work, state and local governments stretched to the hilt with enormous costs as a result of the virus, and a loss in tax revenues due to people not buying as much as they did before. We need to be investing in new technology. We need to be investing in new advanced manufacturing, clean energy, infrastructure. There are lots of ways that the stimulus package could help existing workers who are out of work or who are struggling, those essential workers who need to have the equipment that they need. We know how when the virus first broke out, we ran short of protective equipment. President-elect Biden has said right away he will invoke the law that allows us to require our large employers to create the kind of equipment that we need, manufacture it right away by the Defense Authorization Act, making sure that as we face this virus, we are equipped with every possible tool that we need to combat it. So it is essential. They have to pass it, and I'm sure that it will be a top priority when President-elect Biden takes office, if they don't do it in the lame duck session.
Valerie, let me get a quick takeaway message from you, something tweetable about designing an inclusive world. What do leaders need to think about in terms of that topic in 2021?
What do you need to thrive? What does everybody need to thrive? Ask your workforce. They'll tell you. They need equal pay. They need paid leave. They need paid sick days. They need flexibility. They need to not be harassed at work. They need opportunities for advancement. I mean, the good news is we know what the solutions are. And the other good news is that it is becoming increasingly clear that companies that do make those kinds of investments are more productive, more profitable, more efficient, less turnover. And so we just have to translate these concepts into action.
Valerie, thank you so much for your time and for joining us today, co-chair, United State of Women and senior advisor to the Obama Foundation. Thank you very much for joining us today. Sophie, let me toss it back over to you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you again, Karen, for your skillful moderation, as well to you, Valerie. You always bring such great insights to the Women's Forum, and today also a sense of hope. So I thank you both for that. A more just future is really a global effort, and I'm sure that many of our participants can draw not only inspiration, but also specific strategies for creating change around the world. Now, our participants once again have a choice. Our first session looks at how to deploy AI in an effort to create a more inclusive world. The second session explores the intimate connection between green jobs and STEM skills. And finally, we have a session on how women's leadership can energize collaborations between government and business to shape an inclusive recovery. So again, please click on the purple live button at the top of your screen and select which session you would like to attend. Thank you very much.